Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 2 of BFSG's fall webinar series. My name is Erin Schneider. I'm a client service associate here at BFSG, and I'm joined by my colleagues Keith Johnson and Sophia Liu as our speakers today. Our topic today is debt management and budgeting, where we're going to be discussing practical strategies to take control of your debt and how to build a realistic budget that aligns with your lifestyle, financial goals, and cash flow. And with that, I'll pass it over for Keith and Sophia to give their introductions.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it. So wonderful presenters. You're setting the bar pretty high there, but no, I'm just kidding. So again, my name is Keith Johnson. I am a senior education specialist and financial planner with Benefit Financial Services Group. So essentially what I do is I help clients with investment management guidance, planning for retirement, as well as various other financial planning needs, including what we're talking about today, debt management, and budgeting. And again, thank you everyone for attending. At this point, I will turn it over to Sophia, let her do an intro, and then we'll jump into the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Keith. Thanks, Erin. Hi, everybody. My name is Sophia Liu, and I'm one of the education specialists and also certified financial planners here at BFSG. And today we will be talking about debt management and also budgeting. So hopefully our goal is that when you walk away with this presentation or webinar, you have some tools under your belt, you have a clear direction as to what you should do, and happy to dive right in to the topic. So first, let's talk about the importance of finances and budgeting. So on the right-hand side, you'll see that close to 50% of Americans struggle to come up with $400 in cash in the event of emergencies. And 60% of Americans will face that emergency in the next 12 months or even less. So this shows us that now is a great time to learn how to budget. And unfortunately, our education systems, as great as it is, really lack the financial education piece. So hopefully we can give you some basics so that you can develop the right habit. Oh, was that just me? Okay, we
No, that
will
was me too. Sorry
continue.
about that. I think we're all set.
Awesome. Okay, so here are some additional tools and apps for those who are interested in drilling down their budget. So we have Credit Karma, Quicken, Good Budget, Honeydew, and so on. And they're all slightly different. So I really recommend checking out some of them, or if not all of them, just to see which service best fit your schedule and your personalized habits, because we want you to feel comfortable navigating these apps on a day-to-day basis. Because when we talk about budgeting, it's not rocket science. It's really about creating those good, steady habits when we're talking about managing your cash flow and tracking them and so on. So here are just some of the top recommendations. It's a good place to start to look into. All right.
100%. And I think, Sophia, to interject here, we do a lot of financial planning for folks and debt management. Obviously, that's part of it. So when we talk about expenses and things like that, someone will share with us, okay, yep, my take home is $7,500 per month. And they're telling us they're only spending $4,000 a month, but at the end of the month, there's zero left over. So there's a disconnect there. It's really easy to track fixed expenses, mortgage, water bill, car insurance, all that good stuff. It's the discretionary piece that gets a little fuzzy. How many Amazon packages are showing up at the house and so on and so forth. So kind of use one of these tools just as a starting point, I think is a great idea.
Absolutely. I love it. Yes. Amazon packages. That's right. And here we put together some additional ways, right? In addition to the tools and apps that we just talked about in the previous slide, here are some of the additional ways that you should consider to cut back on some of your expenses or just to help. So first of all, subscriptions. I don't know about you, Keith, but in speaking with a lot of plan participants, employees, meeting with a lot of people, I can tell you that people spend thousands of dollars a year on subscriptions alone. It's kind of one of those things that's more, doormat, and it just kind of slips out of your back door and you don't realize how much money you're spending on subscriptions when added all together. So I would say definitely start there to look at, okay, what are some of the subscriptions? Are there any overlaps? Do you really need all of them? Perhaps you should be canceling some and to be able to find some of the hidden money there. And you can also consider buy used or join a buy nothing group when you can swap goods with people in your neighborhood. And I personally do that. I also have been swapping those things and it's just been helpful, right? And sometimes you can find really good things, even though they're secondhand, but they're in great condition. Next, I don't think this is a stranger to anyone, but meal prep. On average, you can save about $30 per week, and that's pretty conservative numbers. But if you annualize $30 a week, again, little things add up here, it totals to about $1,600 a year. There are also some cashback rewards app, such as Fetch Rewards, Retail Me Not, Upside, etc. So you can definitely do some research and find the one that tailors to your needs. But there are a ton of cashback applications out there where you can get, if you're buying for making purchases, why not get a few percentages back? And those add up as well. Next, as a heavy coffee drinker myself, I would say you can also consider making coffee at home. So again, coffees now in Southern California going for anywhere between $5 to $8 a cup. So if you are a heavy coffee drinker, you drink it every day, 5 times a week, right? That's about $2,000 a year, just to do the math. You can also consider finding a side hustle. I know that might not be the case for everybody, but again, we're just putting out options there. Lastly, you can also embrace minimalist wardrobe, right? Buy less and only invest in the items you really need. You can also sell the clothes that you don't wear online. There are apps such as Depop, Poshmark, ThreadUp, etc. And according to the latest CNBC report, people can save or earn up to, close to $150 a month just by selling clothes that they don't wear anymore. So just wanted to throw all these ideas out there. Hopefully some ring a bell and, let us know if you find this helpful. Anything that you would like to add, Keith? Maybe that I missed?
I think we're good. Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so a quick switch. Let's go ahead and talk about a quick snapshot of where we are today. So as you can see here, as a nation, our credit card debt is at a whopping $1.21 trillion. So if you were to divide it by household, it's about $9,200 per household. Okay. And the average credit card interest rate in 2025 is also sitting at around 24.2%. So over 24%, extremely high. Outstanding student loan balances, it's actually at an all-time record, which is sitting at $1.64 trillion today. So the bottom line is, with all these statistics, with where we are as a nation, the total household debt is rising. If we don't have a game plan in place, we might easily be caught into this debt trend. Now, my question would be, well, are all debt bad? So let's talk a little bit about that, right? Debt in general is not inherently bad, right? Its value depends on how it's used and also how it's managed. It can be a financial tool when you use it strategically, but it can also be a significant burden if you manage it poorly. So let's first talk about what are the good debts and the bad debts. So good debt typically involves a reasonable interest rate and also a clear plan for repayment. In addition, the interest you pay on your mortgage and student loans, for example, may be tax deductible. Again, it depends on your situation. So bad debt typically does not build future wealth, and it often involves high interest rates. As we've seen earlier, Credit card debts, prime example of this, right? We've seen earlier 24.2% on average, it's the average interest rate. This makes it very difficult to pay off the principal, and it quickly spirals out of control. But we wanted to caution you. Some might say, hey, you're right, mortgages, student loans, they're considered the good debt. So let's have a ton of that. Well, having too much debt can also turn good debts into bad debt. So you can borrow too much for important goals like college, home, or a car, but too much debt, even if it's low interest rate, can become bad debt. So that's what we want to caution everybody here. Carrying a debt without having a good plan and strategy to pay it off can lead to unsustainable lifestyle, and we definitely don't want to lead you there.
The high interest credit cards, the revolving credit, that's what really drains on your overall retirement plan. We do have a lot of folks, they'll carry a little bit of mortgage debt into retirement. Some want the home paid for, even though maybe the interest rate is only 3% or whatever the case. And that's more of a security thing. But getting rid of most, not if not all of that bad debt before you decide to retire, you're way ahead of the game doing that for sure.
Absolutely. All right. Next, let's take a good look at credit while managing your debt. Why is credit? How does it work? And why is it so important? You'll have an easier time renting an apartment or purchasing a home if you have good credit, or if you can also have better rates on car purchases or even homeowners insurance, etc. Right? So lower interest rates when borrowing when you have a good credit. So having a good credit essentially prepares you for better future. You can say it that way. So here are some of the factors on the right-hand side, right, that affects your credit. So number one is you definitely want to pay your bills on time, right? That's the whole credit thing is, can we trust you, right? Are you reliable? And so we simply want to hone in on this a lot, right? Because paying your bills online, that makes up 35% of how your credit scores are being rated. Okay, and also by the amounts, following by the amounts that you owe, the length of your credit history, new credit, and also a mix of credit, etc., etc. But the number one, the biggest factor, we will say it would be paying your bills online. That's a big part of it. And we also get a lot of questions in terms of, hey, Sophia and Keith, what is considered a good credit? So it also depends on which credit bureau or which credit measuring scoring companies that you use, right? But in general, we would say if your credit score is anywhere between 590 to 669, let's say, right, you have a fair credit score. Anywhere between 670 to 739 or 740, that's considered good. And then between 740 to less than 800, like so call it 799, that's considered very good. And then anything above 800, that's considered excellent. So again, those are just some of the kind of broad groups to help you identify where you kind of stand. And again, every company has a slightly different measuring score, but I would say that's a good generalization. Anything you wanted to add, Keith?
Good, because the credit scores and what is a good credit score, nothing was listed on the slide. That's exactly what I was going to bring up. So kind of gives you a rule of thumb there as to, okay, what is my credit? How does it stack up basically against other borrowers? Because that's what they're looking at too. So
awesome. All right, so I know at this point we've covered a lot of ground and a lot of points. And so here are the 6 simple steps to remind you to effectively manage your debt. So let's look at step 1. First, you want to just take out the books, take out the statements, and assess your financial situation to see where you stand. What are all the debts that you have, right? Consolidate them. Let's look at them. And then next, you want to prioritize your debt. So Keith is actually going to go into this in a little bit in terms of how do you prioritize different debts? Do you prioritize the ones with the highest interest rate or larger balances? What does that look like? Number three, you want to explore different payment options. So this requires you to call the companies, right, to do some research on your part and to ask them, hey, are there any ways where rather than paying on the first of every month, is it possible to go ahead and pay on a different date of the month? Okay, so they're somewhat flexible with those. Number four is negotiate with your creditors. So this is completely optional, but I always recommend people to give it a try because it never hurts. You can call them, call up the credit card company and really ask, hey, I noticed that there are new promotions, 0% APR promotion going on right now. Would it be possible for me to get 6 to 12 months, promotional period where it's zero interest? Because that then can give you more time, right, to really strategize and to have a strategy in place to pay down those credit card debts without incurring interest. And number five, of course, you want to set up automatic payments, preferably. This may or may not be feasible for you. But again, having that, we want to build the good habits, right? So if you're making consistent payments on a monthly basis, you just treat it like any other bill, right? One, it not only allows you to track where you're at, but two, it also holds yourself accountable. So accountability is also very key here. And lastly, you want to monitor and adjust as you go. You might not get it right at the beginning, right on the first go, and your circumstances, situations may also change, right? So there's going to be that adjustment period as well. So just give yourself some grace, right? Take it as you go, being able to be flexible, and adjust to the new habits and lifestyle while you're figuring out what works for you and what does not work for you. And this is also going to be very, very essential as well. I think that would be what I'm covering. Keith, is there anything else you'd like to add before I pass the baton to you?
Yeah, I think just to emphasize the importance of this, it goes beyond just you. So I quick wanted to share, this is a CNBC poll. This suggests that only about 57% of adults in this the United States of America, are financially literate. And this is costing us, in fact, in the year 2024, the lack of literacy costs Americans more than $436 billion with a B. I mean, right now we're saving less, right? Debt, bankruptcies are higher, and just that lack of financial literacy, it could essentially perpetuate into poverty. So that in turn kind of affects all of society. So it's really important to be monitoring, building a plan if you don't have one now. We'll talk about some resources later, but that's really the only thing I had to add to this slide.
Awesome, perfect.
Okay, so let's break down some important habits related to creating a debt-free future, beginning with establishing a budget. Paying off that high interest debt. And we'll talk about, okay, which philosophy is best for you when we talk about that. Building an emergency fund. And I'll say this again, this is like your core, your foundation of your overall plan. And then investing for the future, once you have your emergency fund, debt's under control, and so on and so forth. And always seek professional help. I mean, if you don't have an advisor, we have resources here. We'll talk about calculators, our services, YouTube videos, everything you would need to kind of build your own plan. Okay, there are a couple different schools of thought on establishing a budget. So there's the old school envelope system where you had a bunch of envelopes. Okay, this is a vacation fund, this is a home improvement fund, and so on and so forth. There is the zero-based budgeting approach, and then the 50-30-20 budget. Today, I just kind of want to focus on this. Maybe some of you on the call are familiar with it, So essentially what the 50-30-20 rule is, it's a budgeting guideline that suggests allocating your after-tax income as follows. So not your pre-tax money. This is money that's directly deposited into your checking account, so your net pay. We would want to reserve approximately 50% for your needs, essentials like housing, groceries, utilities. Then 30% for wants, your discretionary spending, dining out, entertainment, travel, and so on and so forth. The remaining 20%, savings and debt management. And here's where I alluded a little bit to that emergency fund, paying down debt. And it's a simple framework for financial planning. It plays into everything, but does require adjustments. Based on everyone on this call, your situation is different. So it's just to kind of prioritize your financial goals and staying on track. Create those habits, right? That's the most important thing. And one thing to keep in mind is you should view paying down your debt almost as one of these fixed expenses. So now I've saved, what do I have left over to go travel, and so on and so forth. Anything to add to that one, Sophia?
Yeah, I think that in speaking with many people, somehow it's either one or the other, like paying down debt. After I pay down my debt, then I will start saving. But I love the fact that, Keith, you mentioned we want to do both at the same time, right? Treat the paying off debt as another expense, another bill, and so on. But we want to do both because they're not mutually exclusive. So that's the key also.
Good. So let's shift gears a little bit here, talk about specific methods for paying off debt. Beginning with the snowball method. So what does a snowball method mean? You list your debts from smallest to largest, focusing on the smallest debt first. So interest rates don't matter at this point. Pay minimum monthly payments on all the other debts you may have. And then after paying off a debt, apply that payment to the next smallest debt. And then you repeat and continue until all debts are paid off. Some of the pros here, seeing the success of your efforts, that encourages you, right? Those baby steps to keep going. Some of the cons, this method may stretch out the debt elimination plan by years if you're paying off lower interest rate cards first, as opposed to higher interest rate cards. And when we do financial planning and things like that, the math suggests that. But again, it's whatever works for you. So maybe it's the avalanche approach. Now we're looking at the debts and paying them down from highest interest rate to lowest. So we want to focus on the debt with the highest interest rate first, and then pay minimum payments on all the other debts. So after paying off a debt, same thing as we talked about before, apply those payments to the next debt, in this case with the highest interest rate. And then again, repeat until all the debts are paid off. So what are some of the pros here? You'll achieve your debt-free status quicker and pay less in interest overall, which is something we look at. Some of the cons, because you're only chipping away a little bit at these high interest rate credit cards, for example, you may lose motivation a little more quickly. The first few wins may be slow to come and far apart. So if you're someone, it's more difficult to stick to something like that, maybe the snowball effect works best for you. And Sophia, I know you talk a lot about this. And any thoughts on this?
I think you nailed it. Yeah, there's no right or wrong. I think it just really depends on, what motivates you, right? We want to figure out what works for you. And so some people I've seen it where, right, I know that financially it might make sense to pay off the ones with the higher interest rates first. But for some people, they just need those baby steps to really encourage them and start building that good habit. And then so snowball method also works for them. But I think it's important to kind of figure out what works for you.
100%. Okay, just some additional tips here for maintaining discipline and consistency in developing a debt management plan. Set clear goals and break it down. So how do you do that? It's pen to paper or using one of those apps. We need to be very detailing about this and not 30,000 foot view at this point. But again, setting those goals clearly, breaking them down, and then, okay, how are we doing? Tracking your progress from when you started to where you are right now. And again, in celebrating those small victories, that'll give you that drive, that momentum to pay down that debt. And then at that point, develop an overall retirement plan. So whether you're looking to pay down debt, save for a major purchase, or even planning for retirement, I talked about this earlier, building an emergency fund. Again, that should be considered your core or your foundation in your plan. It's probably more important now than ever before, considering what 1 in 3 Americans have more credit card debt than emergency savings as of December last year. Only 13% of Americans do not have credit card debt. But at the same time, they don't have an emergency fund either. Another couple factoids here, more than 2 in 3 Americans worry they won't be able to cover their living expenses temporarily if they were to lose their job. So that's an argument for the emergency fund, that 3 to 6 months living expenses set aside in a safe interest-bearing account. If we had been doing this presentation, what, 6 months, even 6 months ago, 9 months, a year, high yield savings accounts, that was a great alternative, right? I mean, interest rates were over 5%, everything, but rates are coming down, and it looks like they're going to continue doing that going forward. When we talk about the emergency fund, that 3 to 6 months living expenses, what that account is getting is irrelevant. But if at the same time, you do have some cash set aside, whether it's at one of the big banks like Chase or Bank of America, earning 0.01%, there are some alternatives out there. So American Express, Capital One, Discover, all these card companies have higher yielding savings accounts. So they're totally liquid. You can get to anything you need to whenever you need to in the form of an emergency or major purchase or whatever the case. So I mentioned a few of these. Anything else you can think of, Sophia, on this one?
I think the most question I got on this was, oh, can I put my emergency funds in a CD versus a high yield savings or a checking account and so on? So to your point, Keith, earlier, the emergency fund, the whole core idea is that it needs to be liquid. So while right now I would say CDs and high yield savings, the rates are pretty similar, ranging anywhere from 3% to less than 4%, I would say, depending on who you go with. But I would definitely recommend more on not locking it up. So don't go with a CD because sometimes when you're in that renewal phase or it auto renews and you're signing a contract automatically with the bank and so on, and let's say emergency happens and you need to pull the money out of the CD while it's still in that term, and guess what? You may have to pay penalties. So that's just another consideration, right? So to your point earlier, in terms of how much that money is yielding, it's irrelevant because this is really to set aside for emergency purposes. Now, of course, it would be great if you can put it into high yield savings, so it gives you that liquidity, that flexibility to take it out at any time while still earning, better than 0.01% interest rate.
Yeah, exactly. I think again, the bottom line here, paying down debt, it's going to set you up for the future by putting you in a situation where eventually you are able to start saving for retirement. And it's so hard. Retirement's so abstract. It's way, way, way down the road. One huge benefit you have here, if you're younger, you're just entering the workforce, or you have this student loan debt or so on and so forth, time is on your side. So it's strategizing, okay, what should I do here chronologically? And I can't emphasize that enough. And Sophia, she mentioned this earlier, it's all those little things that add up as well to get you set on the right track for success.
Absolutely.
So a couple things here, investing for your future, what not to do. Just because you can doesn't always mean you should, right? Many of you on this call, you may have a loan provision in your 401k, 403b, or 457. If you're ever in a jam, this should be viewed as one of your last ditch efforts, so to speak. But again, it's there if you need it. And a couple reasons or observations why here how it works. When you take out a loan in the 401, you're paying yourself the interest back rather than to the bank. It will reduce your paycheck amount and might lead to, once you exhaust that, turning back to the credit cards for taking money out to pay off the credit cards. We don't want to use those again. And one big thing here that's not mentioned necessarily is the money you take out in the form of a 401k, that's no longer invested. So when you stop and think about it, it's okay, you're sacrificing retirement now to get this paid down, but does it make sense? This is when you 100% want to talk to a fiduciary advisor, certified financial planner. And to keep going on that, balance transfers, you probably get those offers in the mail all the time. It's just transferring from one pocket to the other, kicking the can down the road. You're really not changing your behavior. And that's essentially the root right there of what's going on. And it just becomes kind of a vicious cycle when you stop and think about it. Consolidating with high interest rate loans. There are lots of companies and commercials out there saying, okay, we can consolidate everything. We're going to be able to help you out. One thing to keep in mind, you can work directly with the credit agencies. You can do everything that they can do and not pay their fee, because over the long run, I mean, it could actually increase your overall interest costs. Nobody knows. There are no guarantees when you work with those companies. There's a risk of almost worsening the financial situation because maybe you're paying higher payments now, could damage the credit score, increase the temptation to spend more, and so on and so forth. So a ton of consideration when we talk about this. So debt consolidation does not address the root cause of debt in the first place. Like we said, if you're overspending, lack of budgeting, it's all tied to emotion. We make decisions in the stock market and investments based on emotion. On the flip side, I could argue it's the exact same thing. So as we've mentioned repeatedly throughout the presentation, it's important to have a detailed plan to pay down debt. And that can be a daunting task. If you are currently working with a financial advisor, reach out to them for assistance. That's what they do. If you don't have an advisor, you have ample resources here through Benefit Financial Services Group, including our website, YouTube channel, videos, calculators, budgeting templates, as well as access to a team of both Sophia and myself are certified financial planners. That makes us fiduciaries, which means every participant we speak with, it's your first interests or best interests that come first by law, and we're salaried advisors. So if all those do-it-yourself tools don't work, we're here as a resource for you to help out as well. With all that, we'll provide our contact information. We'll leave it up here for a little bit, and then I'll turn it back over to Erin just to see if we have any questions.
Of course. Thank you so much, Keith and Sophia, for a great presentation. I think I even got some tips and tricks out of it. Some of those apps in the beginning are very handy. Before we dive into some questions, I just want to thank all of you for joining us today. In case anyone needs to drop off early, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar so you can reference later. And as I mentioned, we would love to hear your feedback, including any topics of interest for future webinars. So I'll just go ahead and paste a few links in the chat box for everyone. I posted a link to today's slide, as well as BFSG's YouTube channel, where we post webinar recordings and many other educational videos. So that's coming your way in just a second here. And as we begin the Q&A, please feel free to continue typing any questions. We will get to as many as possible before the time is up. There's also a feature where if someone has already asked a question, you can upvote it by clicking the thumbs up icon, and that will encourage us to prioritize the question. And if we are unable to reach your question before our time runs out, please reach out to us directly. Keith and Sophia's emails on the screen there. And for our first question, going back to the emergency savings and mentioning a high yield savings account, what would you say you should look for if choosing a high yield savings as your emergency fund location? What would you say is a good percentage to be looking for?
As far as an interest rate, I mean, what's Flourish paying right now? Sophia, three something. I mean, they're all kind of in that neighborhood between
Yeah.
low three to kind of high three right now, unless there's something out there I'm missing.
No, you're absolutely right. It's ranging anywhere between 3 right now to, I mean, 4. There are some out there that are at 4, but again, because the rates are coming down, so I think 3.75, that's still a really good one. Flourish is at around 3.25 or 3.5.
Okay. And the one biggie when you're looking at that, make sure it's FDIC insured. That's what you want to look at. And then number two, liquidity. Those are the two biggies right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's just also, personal preference, right? Because some, if you have, I'm just making it up, right? Maybe Discovery or Capital One, there you have a branch nearby, and that's more feasible for you. And then their rates are, just maybe 0.25% off or 0.1% off. You can also take that into consideration, the convenience aspect of it, or which platform you prefer.
100%.
And do you mind elaborating more on FDIC insurance? What does that mean? What does that cover?
It's not a federal agency, so to speak, but everything like let's say, for example, a bank were to go out of business and the government, everything's backed and guaranteed. So if you're saying $250,000 sitting in a savings account, that's FDIC insured and the bank went upside down, you would get that money back. And this is based on account registration. So if you have more than that, you might have to open up a joint account, for example. I mean, those are some of the things we can speak, offline to kind of go through your situation. But that's kind of what it boils down to. The money's protected. Credit unions, for example, they're a little bit different. What's their insurance, Sophia? NCUA something or other? National Credit Union.
I can't remember the acronyms, yeah, but
So
I know what.
yeah, so they have a different type of insurance. It's very similar to FDIC, but it is not. So lots of things to explore there.
And just one more question surrounding the high yield savings account. I know we mentioned a few, but what are, say, some of the top or most reliable agencies you should look through?
Marcus is a good one. That's a Goldman Sachs company. We don't endorse or have a relationship with any of these places. Um, Outside of Marcus, one thing, this might be counterintuitive, but if you do have a credit card that you're paying the balance off and so on and so forth. Sophia mentioned Capital One, for example. If you've had a Capital One card forever, they offer a high yield savings account. Maybe you have an American Express. They also offer a high yield savings account. So if you're someone you're looking to simplify things, all those banks, and they're going to be within a fraction as far as the yield on the money that you deposit in there, and they're all FDIC insured, so you don't have to worry about that, and they're totally liquid.
Going back to the slide mentioning where you should keep your credit card utilization under or at about 25%. What are some tips and tricks to staying within that 25% if you're, say, struggling and overspending in that capacity?
I would say, right, first we need to take a look at your expenses, right? How much is coming in, how much are we spending? And then one of the tips I personally heard when I was working at the banks was, so the credit card, they have the credit card due date. Okay, let's say it's November 5th, but they also have another date, that's the statement closing date. And so this is from back when I was working for Merrill Lynch and JP Morgan Chase. And so the recommendation is, right, you can, if you can afford to, go ahead and pay off that balance at the statement closing date rather than the actual due date. Because what happens is these credit card companies, on the statement closing date, that's when they go in and pull and see, okay, what's the snapshot? Sophia is spending, 7,500 out of the $10,000 credit limit that she has. But if you were to pay that off, right, let's say my credit card bill, $2,000 or $3,000 is not due, right, until November 5th, but you decided to pay, or I decided to pay it off at the statement closing date, which is October 20th, something like that. So at that point, when they take a snapshot of that, it will actually show that I'm underutilized or I keep it a little bit under, right? So I don't know if that makes sense, but that would be my suggestion in terms of keeping it under 25% if you can afford to do that.
That makes complete sense. And I thought of something here. If you haven't, check your credit reports, because I don't know the numbers currently, but the estimates used to be that 50+% of credit reports have errors in them. And you can make your own dispute if an account that's closed or whatever the case, or hey, this isn't my account. Cleaning that stuff up will help you out tremendously. So, I mean, what is it? Annualcreditreport.com, I think. I don't know if there are other tools now, but you can pull credit reports, every single major bureau from that site, and almost kind of make it a cycle where you're pulling from one early on in the year, the next one in the middle of the year, and then the last one towards the end of the year. So you're constantly monitoring your credit at no cost. So I'd highly recommend doing something like that.
Yeah, it's good to know kind of the back room, how they're actually getting to their scores in order to kind of maximize your usage. So
Right.
that's great. Going back to the different methods that we talked about for paying off debt, the snowball versus the avalanche. What if you had three high interest credit card debt all at the same high interest rate? How would you kind of go about tackling that? Because that all just sounds pretty daunting. But again, in order to get to that 25% utilization, is it just kind of hack away at what you can, or what are your thoughts?
Interest rate, and Sophia, feel free to chime in. I mean, it's kind of irrelevant which one you're paying down using that method, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
That's right.
I guess actually you could argue, okay, well, if the balances are identical too, then it's totally. But if you're trying to get that 25%, okay, which has the highest balance, even though the interest rates are the same? Those are all the things we can analyze, but I'd kind of take that approach.
Yeah, I would say one of the steps that we mentioned was to call the credit card company and just ask if you can get the promotional 0% APR, right? Promotional period and so on. That's what I would try. And I've recommended it a lot of people that I met with to do so. And so sometimes it doesn't hurt to try, right? But and actually I would say 6 out of 10 times people come back to me and they say, hey, actually that worked. They gave me 3 months of 0% interest or 6 months, etc. I've never seen it go beyond 12 months, but I would say, again, to Keith's point, if they're all the same interest rate, then it doesn't really matter which one you tackle first. But I would say then kind of take it in a different approach and say, okay, well, can you call them and ask for the 0% APR so that way you buy yourself some time where it would be nice to make those periodic payments without having the interest keep kicking in and compounding.
No, that's a really great tip, Sophia. And I'm also just posting in the chat again our financial planning email in order to reach out to either work with Sophia or Keith with any personal situations going on, because they're able to kind of go way more in depth with a bit more information. Um, so a quick one, as CFPs, are you able to negotiate tax debt or give advice on tax debt?
Utilize tax planning software, not specific tax advice. So we talk about Roth conversions and rental properties and things like that. As far as negotiating tax debt, I would 100% see a tax attorney on that. So you want, that's part of the whole planning process where Sophia and I are doing the holistic planning. We have the CPAs over here, tax accountants over here, attorneys over here. You'd want to utilize their service. So
And we're able to provide some names again if you reach out to that email post in the chat and on the slide, we could provide some names to that are specific for your situation.
for sure.
Mhm.
Real quick clarifier on our last question. Sophia, you were saying that you're able to call and ask for a 0% APR on a current credit card if there was a current debt on credit card.
Correct. That's right. So the way that I coach people to do it is when they call on the current credit card, obviously they're paying high interest rate on that, right? And so you can ask them and say, hey, I just noticed that, there's new customers coming in and they're taking advantage of the 0% APR for however many months. You can probably kind of Google that and just see what other people are getting, or if you are getting additional mails, additional advertisement in the mail. But it really doesn't really matter what you say. It's around 6 to 12 months. And you can just tell them and say, hey, can you please extend the same offer to me? I know I already, I'm an old customer, but I'm a loyal customer and so on. I've even heard people go as far as like threatening to, bring their debt, like roll it over to somewhere else. And then the credit card company was like, okay, yeah, we'll agree. We'll give you, 6 months, 0% APR. So kind of go that route, but just again, yes, that was meant for current credit cards. Just to try and see if you can get that.
I always say, don't ask, don't get. So it's always worth a try.
Right.
Going back to high yield savings too, just a quick clarifier. If you were to have multiple high yield savings account and they were all FDIC insured, would that mean each account is insured up to that 250K limit?
Million if you're married.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
And then another quick question. Have you ever heard or experienced where someone's credit score is being blocked or seems to be blocked when creditors are going in to look at someone's specific credit score?
You can block it wrong, right, Sophia, as far as
Yeah,
pausing your credit. That's the only thing I can think of there, actually.
right. Yeah, I know a lot of people lock it, and then when they're about to make purchases and so on, they unlock it, and then so that way the companies can pull the credit. So that's the one thing I can think of.
That's the
But
only thing I can think of on that.
Yeah, so maybe just a one-off circumstance. Again, I responded to your question, attendee, but please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to discuss specifics on a one-on-one call sort of thing as well. And that seemed to be, oh, sorry, I just saw another question come through the chat box. Um, This is surrounding a student debt loan. What can I do about a parent plus student loan that someone could not afford potentially? Are there any sort of forgiveness programs going on or any wisdom we can share on that?
Sophia is the expert in this field, so I'll defer to her.
Um, I know the student loan forgiveness has ended. So
Right.
actually speaking with a lot of plan participants, they are kind of like in that adjustment period where they're scrambling. They're like, okay, so now it's not going to be forgiven. Now I have to come up with a game plan to like tackle it and so on. I would say the best way is you're more than welcome to schedule an appointment with us for us to really take a look at everything. Um, yeah, but as far as resources and so on, um, yeah, we can probably, yeah, send us an email and then I can do some digging and then we can certainly get back to you on that. I don't want to give you false information and so on, but yeah, send us an email and then we can certainly point you and send you some of the resources that we can find.
If you have a hodgepodge of private loans, public loans, and so on and so forth, we can kind of put some things together for you as well. So
Yeah. Mhm.
Great. That seemed to be our last question here today. I wanted to thank our presenters again, as well as for your attendance and all of your wonderful questions. Remember to join again next week for our webinar surrounding end-of-year tax strategies and what the tax bill means for you. Thank you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.